Oh, it's been a while since we did one of these discussions. Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala, and welcome to the Starfighters update. So, in today's video, I want to talk about something that I've seen a lot of comments about recently, given that this patch didn't actually contain as many unique vehicles as it appeared to. 7 different variants of the F-104 Starfighter in 5 different nations, and being called Starfighters, you can kind of see why. But also a new British Phantom, 3 new Japanese torpedo bombers, a German F-86k and G91R4, new French and Italian Shamans, British Stuarts, a Taiwanese Saber, some copy-paste premium Japanese fighters, and this, the M18 Hellcat, now available not in the American, but in the Italian tech tree. You know, that sounded like a shocking plot twist until I remembered that the Chinese got an M18 almost 6 months ago. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that we are back to regular live streams every Tuesday, Friday and Saturday over on twitch.tv/thescottishkoala. Those are US time zones, so if you want to come be part of the Koala streams, you know what to do. But yes, today we're talking about copy-paste vehicles, because I've seen a few content creators, as well as members of the community in general, complaining about this apparent issue. And I just don't see what the problem is. Or let me rephrase that, I do see what your problem with it is, and I want you guys to know going into this discussion that I do get where you're coming from. But I want to kind of present a counter-argument to the complaints that have been levelled at Gaijin these past few weeks for the copy-paste additions in the Starfighters patch, and kind of go through why they're not so much of an issue in my opinion. I hope that by doing this, the wider community can better diversify the outside opinions that are influencing their own, and perhaps I can convince some of you to see things in a different light. If not, then this video just serves as these are my opinions on copy-paste vehicles in other tech trees, because a lot of you have been asking that. So let's first establish a few things. Copy-paste vehicles appearing in simulator mode is indeed a big problem. Spookston made a video talking about this just a few days ago, and he is correct in that. Vehicles like the new British Stuarts or Chinese T-34s, not so much, but what about the French Panther, or the Taiwanese and now Italian Hellcat or Chaffee? These vehicles appear on the opposite side to the nation which actually built them and fields them naturally, and that's most definitely a problem and should not happen in simulator mode. Gaijin has let this happen in the past, with Taiwanese M48A1 Pattons fighting against the Americans, and the same thing happening with the German BMP-1 fighting against the Soviets, for example, which is either readily abusable or just asking to be team killed, because the vehicles are often very difficult to distinguish from their foreign counterparts. But the lineups of vehicles available in Sim is specifically chosen by Gaijin. It's not just a case of whatever you bring in, as it is in realistic or arcade. They have to be permitted vehicles, and while Gaijin has failed in the past to keep on top of this issue, that is not an issue with the vehicles themselves being added. Instead, the fault for that lies squarely at the feet of the devs responsible for allowing them into the sim lineups when they shouldn't have. Another issue Spookston mentioned is that these vehicles can sometimes be blatantly superior to their naturally fielded counterparts. A prime example of this is the German M48A2 Patton, which is noticeably better than the US M48A1 and yet sits at a lower battle rating. The French Shamans, while being a lot closer to what you might call a unique vehicle, are still superior Shaman variants when stacked up against what the US have at 4.7. But this issue has very little to do with what the vehicles are, who fields them, and what nation made the vehicle that they're based on. Instead, it's just a simple balance issue. The German M48A2C or French M4A4 SA50 are somewhat overpowered at their respective BRs, but that's nothing to do with the American Patton or Shermans respectively. The same tanks in the American tree would be just as imbalanced, and even more senseless, since you'd have their counterparts right there to compare them to. So essentially you have to look at them as if they were completely unique tanks, and ensure that they're balanced just like you would any other vehicle. The newly added Italian Shaman Firefly is a good demonstration of this, as the inclusion of an APDS round for it puts it at a higher battle rating, ensuring balance. This negates a lot of the issues that Spookston mentioned, and let's assume for the rest of this video that those issues weren't here. Gaijin does not allow captured or lend-lease vehicles in opposing nations into simulator battles ever again, and balance is sorted out exactly as it should be for all vehicles. So let's talk about the Italians receiving an M18 Hellcat. Is it balanced? Yes, it's at the same BR as the American one, and it's functionally no different. Is it necessary? Perhaps. The Italians do have the option of the P43 BIS to be added, a mock-up only vehicle, but one that I've argued for its addition in the past. Even if it were added, however, it would basically be an Italian T25 by the way, the M18 Hellcat still fills a noticeable gap where Italy lacks this type of vehicle. Either way, the addition of one doesn't negate the need or potential for the other. Is it historical? Yes, many countries, including Italy and the Republic of China, did field M18s after World War II. So the only real problem faced by its introduction is that the Americans now have to fight against a tank that previously only they had. In other words, it's purely jealousy. Which is fair, as the Hellcat was always a favourite of the US tree. I guess another problem is that you now have to grind through a tank that you already researched in another tree, and that is a pain, but when the vehicle fills a hole that needed filling, well, something had to go in there, and that something requires research, regardless of what it is. Gaijin can't just invent machines that weren't created in order to plug a gap either, so when an option like the M18 is available, boo-hoo Americans, if you want the Obel or Ariete, you gotta research the Hellcat a second time. The more unique a vehicle is, the better, of course, and at the very least, unique variants of foreign vehicles, like the Italian hybrid Shaman or German KV-1 with the 75mm, should be considered over straight-up lifted vehicles. But when there is no alternative that could fill a hole, and the work is already there really is no reason to deny the Italian tech tree an M4A4 Shaman and M18 Hellcat. It does suck, and I get that, but the alternative, leaving the gap unfilled, is worse in my opinion. Now one thing that does kinda suck is that the US tree still lacks the M4A4, and it should be given to them, right? Huh, now you're arguing for copy-paste. Now Spitfire made a video the other day talking about this same issue as well, and in that video he said that the Italian Hellcat is unnecessary because the Breda 501 exists, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The Breda is 4.0, while the Hellcat is a much better tank, far and away superior, and hence sits way up at 5.7. It fights different opponents, like Centurions and ARL-44s instead of Churchills and Chaffees, and does so using different weaponry, a different playstyle, and with access to a different lineup with the Shaman Firefly that was also added. Once again, this machine sits at 5.3 because of its APDS round, meaning it fights different opponents than the lower BR Fireflies, and handles them accordingly, and this changes the experience you get playing the tank. Interestingly, Spitz said that the Firefly is invalid too, but then said that the German M41 is great because of its unique shell, so big thunk. You also get to use close air support options that previously had no tanks to pair with them, unless you want to drag them all the way up to 6.3, or drag lower BR tanks up to their BR. Admittedly, there are only two planes that fit that bill anyway, one of them being, ironically, a BF-109, but the point still stands. So all of these tanks, I think, fill gaps that did need filling, and I would tend to disagree with anyone saying that they aren't necessary. So, having established that necessary vehicles kind of get a free pass, what about vehicles that are, without a shred of doubt, redundant? The British this patch got a couple of rank 1 Stuarts, for example. But their addition, while unnecessary directly, allowed the Crusader light tanks to be moved up to rank 2 under the Cromwells where they'd fit better, and therefore become scout vehicles as well. A good change. I do think the two Stuarts should at least be folded in with each other, but that's a minor nitpick, and besides that there are zero problems with their introduction. Britain never fights America anyway, they always fight alongside them, and they're rank 1 tanks, they take about 2 matches to skip completely. Then there's the Japanese premium fighters, 3 copy-paste props with minimal differences if any, mostly just unique pilots or squadrons. They weren't necessary, Japan has plenty of premiums. They don't create any problems either, do they? And they were easy to add, so why not? Japan also got the B-6N torpedo bombers, F-104J, and the Type 93, one of the most memorable vehicles of the patch, so it's not even like Japan received nothing else but copy-paste. The new Challenger 2F is practically just an aesthetic difference until its CITV and thermal camo netting are modelled, but that's just the same as Italy getting the Ariete PSO to strengthen their lineup, and that's enough. But what about the F-86k Saber dog going into the German tree? And wow, did Spit seem to have a problem with this one, saying things like, "There is no place for this and we should be asking Gaijin to remove it, it cannot continue." But I'm really not sure why. Now, we all know the reason this seemed like a brilliant idea to Gaijin, and that's because it puts something between the German players who already have the CL-13B and the F-104G Starfighter. So if you wanted to buy the Starfighter, it's going to cost you twice as many GE to do it, as there's an extra grinding step in the way, so more money for Gaijin, and that does kind of suck. The Germans getting the F-86k is without a doubt unnecessary. They already have the CL-13s at that BR, and the Saber dog doesn't carry any ordnance to set it apart either. So it wasn't something that really added to the tech tree at all, besides expanding the roster of West German fighter jets, and the new premium G91R4 is exactly the same. But top-end jets is always mixed RB anyway, so it's not like anybody has to fight the F-86k that didn't have to before. It's not a jet that anybody would ever accuse of being overpowered, so the potential of having more of them in the matchmaker means very little. While Spit's argument was, if you want the F-86k, that's what you play Italy or France for. No. Not only is the F-86k not a signature piece of either of those nations' air trees, nobody's playing France specifically for the Saber dog, especially not now with the Mirage 3 coming out, but it's an American aircraft in the first place. So Germany getting it is no worse than Italy or France. It might be unnecessary, but it's not like it's doing any harm just sitting in the tech tree for anyone who wants to play it. And France didn't even need it either, because they have the potential of the Mystère 4A to add, basically an equivalent anyway. So I actually have more of a problem with France having the Saber dog than Germany, because, for now at least, it's meant that we don't have the actual French jet counterpart, while Germany didn't trade anything for theirs. But considering that it's not an overly special jet to any tree, and isn't unique to either of the nations who do have it already, plus like the F-104 it was a jet designed for export, it is literally just a curiosity piece for any German fans who like the idea of a more powerful, yet less nimble Saber, but didn't want to grind out an entire Italian or French aviation tree to get one jet that isn't overly important anyway. And for that, I say it was a fine addition. It's a unique jet to the German tree, and it's a foreign aircraft in the other nation's trees in the first place, so remind me again where it does and doesn't belong. It's perfectly balanced, historically accurate, gives a wider variety of jets that will be seen in matches, and causes no problems. Not unless you're just a wee bit butthurt that your grind for the German F-104 is going to take a little longer, and isn't that just a copy-paste American jet anyway? Now, it's important to say that this is a context-sensitive thing, and I'm not advocating for everyone to get every vehicle they ever used, regardless of need. The Italian M18, they do kind of need. It fills a very noticeable gap where 4.0 jumps right up to 6.3, skipping some of the most important BRs in the early game. The German F-86k I'm okay with because even though it's not necessary, it isn't a signature or important jet to any tree. It's actually the new G91 Premium I have more of a problem with, because the G91 is a rather signature and important Italian jet, and the Germans already have one, the R3, which at least has different guns. I don't think the Israelis should get their own tech tree because it's too much copy-paste, a complaint also levelled at China, who basically scrapes by on a couple of interesting unique options, several of which aren't even here yet, Type 64, Q5 Phantom and Type 99 chief among them. With Israel, it's literally just the muck of R3 and 4 at this point. There are also plenty of other tanks or aircraft that could be added that are copy-paste, but would be crossing the line, examples where I would actually agree with some of the complaints, so it's definitely a case-by-case basis. A certain level of copy-paste is okay, and Gaijin has made sure they do not cross that line, straight up denying captured Panthers for the British, even though they were fielded twice in combat in World War II. Lifting signature and important vehicles is only okay if it's desperately needed. Obviously, Sweden wasn't going to miss out on their Leopard 2 variants just because they're important to Germany. That wouldn't work, and the same goes with Germany getting aircraft like the MiG-21. If you have a problem with copy-paste, shouldn't you be completely against anything East German, like the MiGs? Nobody seemed to have a problem with them, except me. It's also of course bad when these copy-paste vehicles flood the matchmaker too severely and make games too samey, another thing Spookston brought up. Loads of Shermans and Chaffies who just fight more Shermans and Chaffies, or teams made up half of US Corsairs and captured Zeros, fighting teams of half Japanese Zeros and captured Corsairs. Those matchmakers cease to be fun after a while. The lifted vehicles take away variety and uniqueness from the matches, and as the meme goes, every nation has a Sherman. But you have to ask at that point, is it that those vehicles are too powerful and that's what's attracting more players to play them over the unique vehicles of the tree? Or is it that they're just too prevalent? Some of these vehicles are too powerful, that's a balance issue, and actually one that generally tends to happen when variants are different, like the German KV-1 with the 75mm or the French Shermans. But the Italian M18 and Firefly aren't overpowered, and they're not overly prevalent either. Once again, I think Gaijin has been careful to select which vehicles they do lift specifically to avoid these issues. So while copy-paste might at times be bad, these ones, in my opinion, just aren't. In fact, they're far less of a problem than vehicles like the German P-47. Provided the foreign equivalents are balanced, it also gets rid of that idea that the nation that made them is redundant. Nobody's going to France specifically to play Shermans, or Germany specifically to play T-34s, KV-1s and KV-2s. It does, however, act to convince die-hard German fans that, hey, these Russian tanks are actually pretty fun. I might hop over and give that tech tree a look. I think what a lot of content creators fail to take into account is that a lot of the regular player base, who aren't Gaijin partners, pick one, maybe two nations and just play them. Of course, it does kind of suck when Germany has the best variant of the KV-1, Sweden has the best variant of the Leopard 2, and China has the best variant of the F-104, at least for now. But I don't see that as reason enough to deny those vehicles for those nations. It's just a shame. And it also has nothing to do with the German Saber Dog or Italian Hellcat. I think people complaining are also thinking, if the Germans are getting an F-86k and the Italians a Hellcat, what next? British captured Panther premiums? Are the Swedes going to get an Event Abrams because of the 1992 trials? Are the Israelis going to get their own tech tree full of nothing but copy-paste right up to rank 7 with the late model Merkavas? Or are the British going to get an Abrams or Leopard of their own because of the Australian or Canadian models? No, none of these things have happened or likely ever will, and a German F-86k or Italian Hellcat are not comparable to a British M1A1 AIM or Israeli tech tree. You might also notice that while Germany did get both an F-86k and an F-104G, they didn't get their F4F model of the Phantom, because that would be crossing the line, at least right now, and the German variant likely won't come until the game moves on towards later jets, or radar-guided missiles, to make sure that Germany isn't stepping on America's thunder, so to speak, because they already have its main rival, the MiG-21. A British Avon Saber would be fair game, just as the F-86k is, as would a Taiwanese M31D. But I think Gaijin knows where the line is. They are not adding premium Israeli Bf-109s or British Panthers. So don't get mad at Gaijin for something they haven't done. Anyway lads, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Please take it as what it is, and that is a constructive counter debate, not shit talking anybody else or anything like that. I did poke fun at Spit a few times, he's done the same to me in the past, and it's all good natured. So I've linked both his and Spookston's videos in the description below for you to check out if you haven't already. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, I just wanted to present mine here because I seem to be one of the few people not pissed off by the copy-paste that we got with this update. It might be an unpopular opinion, but I hope I can kind of neutralise the previously very one-sided debate. If you're in the same boat, let me know in the comments. The Starfighter of course was always going to be that way, and I think this is something we will have to get used to going forward with more modern tiers, where a lot of nations did make use of foreign tech that we are going to get in game, such as an East German MiG-23, French F-86k Saber, or Chinese F-5 Tiger II. France and Britain will share the Jaguar, Germany and Britain will share the Tornado, and so on and so forth. And I think people are generally okay with them. It's more those vehicles that are filtered in the tech trees that we seem to be having a problem with. That's probably just because it messes with something we already know rather than being completely new territory like rank 7 jets. I think if the German or Russian P-47 Thunderbolts were being introduced now, the reaction would be completely different. But I think the specific vehicles we've gotten in the Starfighters patch are fine, and there's no reason to assume that Gaijin will cross that line in the future. I think it speaks volumes that in his video, Spitfire said that he had no problem with the Hitler Bolt, even though that aircraft was probably the worst offender of all the copy-paste vehicles causing problems. But it's pre-existing old War Thunder content, been here for a long time just like we have, and nobody gives a shit about it now. Italian M18 on the other hand.
Well, then everyone loses their minds.
Maybe it wouldn't have been so bad if the Italian M18 were a premium, not a tech tree vehicle. Or maybe it would have been worse, I don't know. Let me know, and let me know your thoughts on all this discussion down below. Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm totally wrong and nations should only get tech which they developed themselves, and to hell with the massive BR gaps and tech tree holes that would crop up as a result? Either way, please keep it civil, and if you want to chat with me about this or any other issue, remember I do live stream every Tuesday, Friday and Saturday over on Twitch, so go follow me over there. Leave a like and subscribe, join the coalition, and as always, please remember, keep your whiskey to hand, keep your kilt on, and I'll catch you next time. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting the channel on Patreon. Honoree Gusan, Ian Anderson, Bluefeet, Mo, Roskill, Bias or Mover, Metallic Rain, Charts 152, Present, Captain Fubar, Britlander, Seagull Nuts, DA261, Latvian Wolf, Gisli Gadarsson and Dark Recon, you lads are brawl. If you want to join them then check out Patreon at the link in the description below.